when it first...
Radio.com.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Benetti, and along with Joe Montaldo, we co-host a new show called News on the Flip Side. You can catch us every Saturday night, 8 p.m. Central, where we will be discussing current events and topics going on in the world today. We have opinions on everything. There's no topic that we won't discuss, and we'll go places that other shows wouldn't dare. False history gets made all day, every day. The truth of the new is never on the news, but you can catch it here, News on the Flip Side, only on the UFO Paranormal Radio Network.
Light up your night with The Kevin Smith Show. Hi, this is Kevin Smith. Join me Monday through Friday right here on the Paranormal Radio Network.
Hi, everybody. This is Erica Getch. I hope to see you on Friday at 8 p.m. Pacific on The Connection, keeping you connected 1 hour at a time. For more information, please visit thegalacticconnection.com.
Welcome to another episode of The Dawn of Shades. I'm your host, Gia Scott, and once again, we have another fascinating topic tonight, but before we jump off to that conversation, we've got our usual announcements to make. For tonight's show, like always, I would love to hear from the listening audience. So, please send your questions and comments to me at giascott@exogenynetwork.com. You don't need to worry that I'm going to give your email address out over the air or your full name, and I'm not going to spam you forever and ever either. I just don't have time for that, so it won't ever happen. And don't be shy. I know you have something on your mind that you would love to have the answer to. Now, tonight's guest is Judy B. Gardner, the author of Cosmic Dreaming. Judy, would you be so kind as to introduce yourself to the audience, as well as tell them where your website is found?
Great, Gia. Well, actually, the title of the book is Lavender. The subtitle is An Entwined Adventure in Science and Spirit. And the website is what you had said, is www.cosmicdreaming.com. So,
okay. That's why I asked you to introduce yourself, because every once in a while I'll goof something.
Well, I mean, Cosmic Dreaming is sort of the umbrella for Lavender. And if anybody's interested in the book, if they go on to Cosmic Dreaming, they can go to the Lavender link. And then we'll tell them all about the book and that it can be ordered at Amazon.com.
Okay. Well, Judy, everybody dreams. Even if we don't remember our dreams, we have to go through that dream state in order to get actual restful sleep. So what is Cosmic Dreaming really all about?
Well, Cosmic Dreaming is an outgrowth of Lavender, and the way this all began was I should just take you back to a little bit of my beginnings, which was a corporate background. I was in various jobs in publishing and in advertising and in media for over 25 years, and then I just decided to retire that corporate briefcase. And I started to do other things. And during that time, I began to notice my dreams. So we just fast forward to 1993, and I was living in Copenhagen, Denmark, and I was conducting a dream group there, helping others. I was married to someone who was attached to the American Embassy there. So it was a very international dream group, and there were so many cultures, and what I saw there was a terrific opportunity to examine cross-cultural exchanges in dreams. And some of our dreams from one culture to the next, they're very, very similar, and then, of course, there are others that are quite different, just depending on, the country that people are living in. So while I was doing this, Gia, I was helping other people, but I was also seeing a lot of trouble spots in my own life. And I started to notice that there was a family matrix that was coming through, and that I was repeating a lot of relationships based on that family matrix, and it wasn't altogether healthy. And then in 1994, well, I should say it was like in the period, I had a very dark period from 1993 to 1995 where I lost my brother and my best friend. I was in a terrible marriage, and so there was marriage and divorce within that period of time. And my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and I was in a near-fatal automobile accident, and moving from one country to another and back. So, there was a lot of stress going on in my life during that period. And then what happened was in 1994, I received a dream from a friend on the other side. And he said he was working on a breakthrough for mankind in the dream. And it was about the optic nerve. And I wasn't really sure what I was supposed to do about the nerve. I didn't know too much about it other than it was attached to the brain. And I started to get an avalanche of dream symbols about the visual system, like the cornea and the lens, the retina, the hypothalamus, the adrenal gland, and I couldn't really understand why. And then that batch of dreams was followed by dreams of not being able to see. So, for example, in one dream I'd be crossing the street with a sleeping mask on, or I'd have bangs in my eyes, or I would go to my dream doctor for glasses, and I began to realize that the focus at that point was on vision, and it was clear that I wasn't seeing something, but what wasn't I seeing? And of course, in those early days, I was not seeing the root of my personal issues, but my lack of vision stretched far beyond that. And so I put light and vision together, and that's what I said, that I realized I wasn't seeing the light, but in what sense? There was one dream, it was actually the optic nerve dream where I'm in a hospital serving tea. And, dreams have a way of, it's the greatest memory bank in the world once we can understand that they have a much greater memory and greater capacity for memory than we are waking, And so I suddenly realized that there had been an early commercial. I think it was a television commercial, and the motto was put out by the Tea Council, and the motto was "Take tea and see." So here I was in this hospital. I wasn't sick, but I was serving tea to other people, and at this point, I'm just going to take a little shortcut here.
Okay.
Knowing that the optic nerve carries light to the back of the brain, I realized, when I started to do research, I realized, well, that's for visual processing. And that scholars through the ages have associated the pineal gland with the third eye. Are you familiar with that, with the third eye?
Just sort of the general pop culture perception of it is what I would say I'm familiar with. I'm certainly no expert.
Right. Well, I mean, it's the pop culture concept really is that of an inner eye, which leads to perception beyond ordinary sight. And so that third eye is near, or they think it's near the pineal gland, and that's activated by light. And that's considered the seat of illumination and intuition and consciousness. And it said that the earliest people used only that middle eye, and were known. Those were the people that were known as the Cyclops. So originally, man had only one eye to see non-solid matter, and that's all that existed at that time. So I was just fascinated with the idea that we have this inner eye, and that it's activated by light. And the messages that I were getting had to do with vision and light. And so while I was sort of pondering this, I realized that there are three eyes that are at work all of the time within us. One is insight, and they all begin with an I. So I start with insight. And, of course, that's not having to think about things. That's really having a quiet mind so that we can hear vision to come through. And then the second one was intuition. And when we really use our intuition, Gia, it's focusing attention on something that we notice at that very moment. There's nothing analytical here. We just notice something at that very moment, and we intuit something. So that's an inner knowing. And then the third eye was instinct, and that's when we sense something coming. We can't see it, but we know it's there. And so anyway, I thought, well, those three, insight, intuition, and instinct really combine. It's all within. So they really combine seeing, knowing, and sensing. So that was sort of where I was at that time with dreams of light and vision. But then they progressed to minerals, metals, genetics, geology, chemistry, physics, and, well, it just goes on. And these are all subjects that were new to me. I had only had 2 years of college, so, I was not really influenced by very much. And it was just overwhelming. So what happened was there was such a wealth of fragments that I realized I was going to have to do something. I was going to have to see why. It was an unusual experience. So I started to see that there were these really bizarre images in my dreams of my birth mother, and I was always dreaming about her floors. And, for example, I would see her with potatoes all over her floors. Now, my mother was like a clean freak. I mean, she would never have potatoes on her floor. I mean, I tell you, honestly, the stranger they are, the more of a message there is. It's just incredible the way this works. And then there were a lot of dreams about urine. And urine was all over her floors, and then I thought, maybe this is a medical issue. But it really turned out to be not that at all. There were lots of dreams about plates, all kinds of plates, base plates and X-ray plates, and you just name, china plates and metal plates, anything you can think of that would have a plate. It was coming into my dream. So I started to isolate these various images, and it turned out that it was the potatoes were the symbol for potassium, which is found in the earth. Urine was the symbol was actually a shortcut or shorthand for uranium, which then translated to radioactive waste. And all of these plates turned out to be tectonic plates. And that's when I had the epiphany that Mother's floors represented Mother Earth, and that there were so many discoveries about the Earth. It was a global issue, something that I was not involved in at all. Then started to focus on geology. And then all the other themes that I just mentioned, the other sciences, knit together later, but the real focus was on geology. So this is where we come to the crossroads of personal dreaming as opposed to cosmic dreaming. And, a lot of people say, well, what is the difference? Well, a personal dream is about the issues of one's life, whereas a cosmic dream shows us how personal issues can morph into dreams beyond ourselves, and how these dreams can reveal our destiny. Personal dreams are about our relationships, about our problems, our marriages, our health. Dreaming serves 4 really basic functions, and I'll just run through them. I'm sure most people know what they are, but when we start with the biologic function, that's a healing function, and that takes in our bodily needs. So dreams, as you said earlier, Gia, they help to improve our sleep, memory. I mean, they're really fantastic for memory. They ward off depression, and, of course, they help us with problem solving. The next function is psychological, and they tell us, this is the one most of us are familiar with, they tell us about our inner nature, so they confront our anxieties and our shortcomings. They awaken us to our potential. They give us great insights into ourself, and they deal with past issues that require resolution. So there's a really great transformational quality in this psychological function, which is what happened to me. And then the next function would be the social, which is society's influence, and where we fit, where we fit into society, how we react to it, and how it affects us. And while I'm on society's influence, I want to point out that many discoveries in dreams have been made, and I'll just mention a few of them. Paul McCartney dreamt the song Yesterday. Billy Joel had a dream about, I think it was about a river, and that's where his River of Dreams album came from. There are, other kinds of discoveries, like the benzene ring was discovered by a German chemist by the name of Kekulé. And he had a vision of a snake biting its tail. So that was a dream that revealed the structure of the benzene ring, which led to the discovery of organic chemistry. I mean, I think that's just amazing.
Yeah.
Just like one image, gave birth to a really major discovery. And Elias Howe invented the sewing machine needle. So that's the social influence in our dreams can really produce some amazing discoveries. And then there was the spiritual function, and that's kind of where I wound up because, we can call it spiritual or we can call it cosmic or transpersonal, religious, but it's basically one of transcendence. So in this function, it connects us to deceased loved ones. We get tremendous amount of spirit communication if we're open, which we'll talk about a little later. It provides a much larger worldview, because it takes us beyond ourselves. And it puts us more deeply in touch with ourselves, each other, and our Creator. So that is sort of the background of the difference between personal dreaming and cosmic dreaming. And for me, it was about geology and what is happening within our Earth. But, for someone else, it could deal with climate change or medicine or agriculture or space or energy. I mean, it could be anything. It's not confined. They're really there are no boundaries. It's just wherever the dream happens to take you. People have asked, well, did I have any particular interest in geology? Well, I mean, from a conscious place, I would have to say not at the time. I mean, I'm passionate about it now, but certainly not at the time. I hadn't even studied it. But somehow or other, these dreams just came in, and I knew that I had to do something with it. So, the question is, well, then what is lavender all about? And it's a hard subject to define because it takes in so much. But I can basically say that it's a novel. There's a protagonist, and there are a lot of characters. It's a mystery adventure story that's wound around us studying consciousness. So it's anybody who enjoys doing a puzzle will like this book because it's just full of puzzles, and I have some funny stories about that.
When I think about dreams, and you're talking about, trying to find the underlying symbology. And I think it was 6-9 months ago, I had this really peculiar dream. And I've made lots of jokes about it because it was so incredibly funny. But at the same time, it was so bizarre that it really did stick in my mind. And it was a dream about chickens. These were special chickens. They were not only chickens, but they were my chickens, and they were singing chickens. And in the dream, I step into an old wooden feed trough that was on the outside of the chicken house, and they had bright yellow hay inside, and it was just the perfect inside of the chicken house. And it had one of those awning-type windows. I leaned over the window to look in there, and I don't remember exactly how I got them started singing, but they were singing, and I was quite pleased because they'd gotten finally to the point where they were able to carry a tune with their clucking. I mean, I'm not talking they were singing with words. They weren't talking. It wasn't like Foghorn Leghorn here. These were chickens making chicken sounds, but they had a tune. And I'm like, why would I dream about chickens? Yes, I've had chickens in the past, but I live in town. I don't have chickens now. Why would I dream about these singing chickens?
Wait, did you raise chickens before?
Long time ago, yeah.
And you say they had a tone? I mean, were they actually carrying
They were carrying, I'm thinking that it was Home on the Range is what they were singing. But, yeah, they were carrying, it was the normal chicken noises, buck, buck, buck,
Right.
But they had a tune to it, and they were carrying the tune. There was maybe 9, 12 chickens, not a lot of chickens, just a few chickens in this chicken house singing to me. And I was quite pleased. They were singing so well. And, logic? Oh, no. There's no logic in this dream. In fact, everybody's asking me, what kind of medication did you take before that dream? And I don't have any reason why I dreamed it. It's one of these dreams that has sort of defied my deciphering it. Because it was just so weird.
Do you have chirping? It's a chain called Chirping Chicken. Do you have that where you're located?
No, I've never heard of it before.
Oh, okay, because, I mean, it is a chain of chicken, sort of fast food restaurants, Chirpy Chicken. But I think you said something about an awning and a window?
Yeah, I stood in this trough to raise me up, and then I leaned over this awning-style window in to look at the chickens. It was a window, not a door, and I was just leaning over there and they were like 6, 8 feet below me. And I was leaning in, to look at the chickens while they were singing. And, nothing in this dream makes any sense. Seeing a trough like that since the 60s, and it was old in the 60s, I don't think they even exist anymore, and certainly nobody builds them. And certainly none that are still hanging around are probably strong enough to let me stand on them. Why, was the trough significant? I doubt it, but, it was like I was dragging up childhood memories of things and combining them with these singing chickens that came from wherever in my subconscious or, outside world or wherever it came from. It didn't make any sense. It still doesn't make any sense. It was just so weird that you remembered it.
Well, yes, and that's what, it's such a great storage. It's a vast warehouse of information that really, I think most of our lives are stored in these dreams if we're willing to open up to them. But for your chicken dream, when you said something that it went back to your childhood, the fact that they were singing home on the range, does that conjure up anything for you?
Oh, I now live in Mississippi, but I spent most of my life in the West, Arizona mostly. Most of my family still lives there. So there are times when I get very homesick for the desert. And possibly that's what it came from. Well,
that's the next question I was going to ask is, if you had the dream some time ago, you probably wouldn't remember, but if you do you remember what was happening in your life around the time that you had the dream?
I can't really remember exactly. I know the general things that were going on during that time period. We recently just bought a house and moved to a whole other town about a month ago. A town I had never visited before we looked at the house that we now have bought. So how's that for something to do kind of off the wall? Most people don't do that.
That's fantastic.
And so anyhow, we moved to an entirely different town. We moved away from the Gulf Coast. I said, living where you have to evacuate every time there's a storm, I'm a desert dweller. I'm not that fond of water.
Right.
So, could some of those ideas been, a contributing point? Definitely. Because there is that slight, I love to go fishing. But I will confess, I have a fear of boats with motors, and things that are in the water that can eat me, like sharks and alligators. They're sea monsters in my mind. Because when it comes right down to it, I really am sort of desertified. The desert was my home for so long, and it was so familiar. And all this watery country here is, in so many ways, still so alien.
Well, that could explain that dream. And the other thing that I wanted to point out is that animals in dreams really represent, or they call on our instinctual nature. So I would ask you, if it were my dream, I would say, well, what do I think about chickens? Do I think they're good to eat? Do I think they're good pets? It would be, you ask yourself, what calls up to you?
In reality, having kept chickens myself, I don't have a high opinion of chickens. They'll even eat each other. They're not nice. They're pretty nasty, really. They're interesting to a degree, but they can, especially if they're crowded, they become very cannibalistic. Any stress with them, they can decide to pick on one member of the flock until they kill them. They can be kind of horrific in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Most people think that chickens are very sweet, and no.
Well, that's interesting because it could also be a metaphor. Chickens, were you afraid to do something? And here they were singing. I mean, your dream chickens were anything but nasty. They were singing.
Oh yeah, and they were nice. Okay, out of all the chickens that I like, the Cochin chickens, which are they're a heavily feathered, kind of heavy-bodied chicken with feathered legs and feet, and they're mild-mannered compared to most chickens. Most of these chickens were buff-colored Cochins.
Oh, those are the ones you like. Okay.
Yeah, they were the ones I like. There were also some Barred Rocks and some other ones mixed in there. I'm one of those weird people. We kept, unusual varieties of chickens rather than your usual Barred Rock or Leghorn, which is the two most common American chickens. And Rhode Island Reds, that's the third one. Those are the most common American chickens, and we always kept different kinds. Just to be different. If you're going to have chickens, why not have something that's interesting to look at? So I've had many kinds of chickens over the years. And like I said, I haven't had chickens now in, 15 years.
Yeah, but what's a dream? That was a part of your life. I mean, do you ever have dreams of people that you haven't seen in many, many, many years?
Yeah. Even people that have died.
Yes. Well, those are very significant dreams.
Well, for me, there was sort of a life-changing one. My son had died when he was 10, and obviously that's a real intense kind of grieving. And this is a few months after he had died, and I was still pretty intense in the grief. And I had this dream about a big family get-together at this big house. I didn't even know that. I've never seen a house like that. And this huge, rolling, expansive lawn. And there were hundreds of people there. Everybody in my family. Some that had died, eons before I was born. Everybody was there. All the dead ones, all the living ones. They were all there. And which is kind of strange in itself. But okay, everybody's there. Some of them, it's so long before that they had no faces because I never knew who they were. And this is the way they were in the dream. And there were young ones and old ones and men and women and kids and, and everything there. And in this dream, I was fixing food, big buffet line that you would have at a huge family gathering. And people had gotten plates and had gone to sit down and eat. And I was fixing a plate of food for my son. And my grandmother, who had died, a year or so before my son, she's standing there, she's looking at me, but she's looking like she did when I was a teenager, not like she did later in life. And she says, "You've got to quit doing that." Because I looked at him and he was rotting. And I was just horrified. He's starting to rot. And she says, "You've got to quit doing that. As long as you keep doing that, he's going to keep on decaying."
What were you doing?
The grief. In the dream, I was fixing him food.
Okay.
But what she was telling him, go.
Okay. In the dream, you were fixing him food. Okay.
Yeah, I was fixing a plate of food for him. Which obviously, someone who's already died doesn't need food to begin with. Right.
Well, you see, that's a very important point because when our logic begins to kick in, after we've awakened and we've recorded the dream, we really should record them or at least remember them. It's those kinds of things that, give us a clue. Wasn't that odd? Why would you be fixing food for him? And of course, you understood it, that you had to
Yeah, my grandmother's message was really pretty blatant in the dream. Right. You've got to quit. You've got to let him go.
But did she say that, or?
Yeah, she said that.
Oh, she said that. Okay. So that was a very direct communication.
Oh, yeah.
Quite often
there was no possibility of misinterpretation at this point.
Okay, so that's great. That it was so clear and so direct. And I'm fascinated with the combination of the dead and the living all in one place, which really speaks to this very thin veil that many people believe is between life and death. It's really basically a different dimension. That when we expire, when we move on to and we take that long journey to a new place. Many people are beginning to write about this, and there's growing belief that there is a very, very fine line between us in life and our departed ones, and I say afterlife because I just personally don't believe so much in death for the reason that I've had so many communications like that, and much of them came into Lavender. I mean, that's how I got to do what I did. So I think that was very significant in the huge house that you described. That's a sort of a classic dream image for, the mansions. You always hear about the mansions in heaven. We don't keep grieving if we can help it. Many people can't. But it's the knowledge of knowing that, your son isn't, it's not that he's totally gone. I mean, he's just in a different dimension. Did he speak to you, or did he know you were there when you had that dream?
Well, he came and got a plate of food from me, and he took the food and took off with the other kids.
Okay.
It's just that when I looked at him, he was, decaying around the edges. And, that was kind of horrific, and it was like, whoa, I don't like that. And that's when my grandmother said, you've got to quit doing that. You've got to let him go, or he's just going to keep rotting.
Okay. Well, I think, that there's so many ways to look at a dream like that, but I and everybody, it depends on the relationships with the one that...
Yeah, and having my grandmother, not everybody has a family like mine, I know that, but in my particular family, my grandmother ruled supreme. I mean, making my parents mad at me was one thing. The mere thought of my grandmother being to me was enough to make me quake in my shoes. Now, keep in mind, she never disciplined me. In my entire life, she raised her voice twice.
But she was the matriarch, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I would be absolutely horrified. And it was funny because, I was in my 30s. And this is not too long before she had a major stroke, but she had several mini strokes. And one particular day, I was at their house, and I had made breakfast, and then when I picked up the dishes, because both my grandparents always put their pills beside their plate because they had things they had to take before and after they ate. And when I picked up her plate, her pills were still there. So I went and I told her grandmother, you didn't take your pills. And she got angry and she raised her voice. And I became that quaking child all over again. I was just horrified. In hindsight, I know this was a sign that there was a problem, because it turned out that the reason she had her stroke was because she wasn't taking the medicine.
Okay.
But we didn't know that at the time. At the time, I reacted as a child. I mean, because she had always been grandmother, I didn't even call her grandma. I called her grandmother.
Grandmother? Oh, she was a powerful figure.
For me, she really was. And like I said, she wasn't mean. She never did a mean thing to me.
Right.
But, didn't discipline me. I mean, just the thought of her disapproving glance was enough. Yeah, it was just, she was very much a figure of power and authority and wisdom to me, I guess.
She sounds wonderful. Were you afraid of her?
No, I wasn't afraid of her. I was only afraid of making her angry or upset or disappointed.
Right. So you needed her approval.
Well, it was the one person that to have express somewhat disapproval. It was really mildly expressed, but it's somewhat, telling me you've got to stop that because that's not healthy, that's not right. Made me pay attention.
Of course, and that's what happens I'm told, in the spiritual world, where they really do guide us. They really are there to protect us. It's omniscience. They see what's happening. And somehow our neural circuitry is such, or our ability to connect, it's that sort of that third eye connecting with outside of the brain that takes us to places like you experienced in our dreams. It's all really there to sort of let us look through a wider aperture, to look through a lens where you just see a much larger picture. And that's what they are seeing all the time. They see what, that's been my experience and the experience of many others, that they see what is happening with us. They may not be able to change our karma, but they are all there to protect us and guide us. And it sounds like that's exactly what your grandmother was doing. So,
yeah, like I said, the dreams can be, because I know in my own case, many times, whether it was a mechanical type problem, a interpersonal type problem, software, whatever it is that I'm trying to figure out how to do, I'll say, okay, let's just leave it. I'll sleep on it, and I'll fix it tomorrow, or I'll deal with it tomorrow. Yeah. And a lot of people find it strange to say that about interpersonal relationships, too. But in my sleep, what I do is I try out various scenarios for repairing the situation.
That's wonderful.
Until you find a best case. With interpersonal ones, of course, you usually just can't fix it. It's not, you need to get some Teflon tape to put on that pipe before you put it back together, or it'll keep leaking. People aren't that simple. But
it's simple, but they really do reveal our emotional terrain. And when we are, when we are courageous enough to look at it, my former colleague and life partner was a man who was highly respected in the dream community. His name was Montague Allman, and he was the one that started the first grassroots dream sharing movement, which is now worldwide. And he used to say, liars dream, but dreams don't lie. So they are really there to tell us the truth. And so when you're mentioning interpersonal relationships, being able to kind of look at where we are emotionally in something, the dream will tell us that. It'll tell us if it's good for us or if it's bad for us. It'll reveal whatever the issue is, and it can also help us to ameliorate whatever the problem is, or to find another way of dealing with it. So it's not, it doesn't have to be, just about mundane things, because the emotional part of our dreams is, probably that's the one facet that people get the most information on.
Yeah, because often it'll give us insight into what we're doing wrong as well.
Exactly. It really reveals all that we need to know. But the problem here, and it's really not a problem, if we are willing to look at it fairly and squarely. And it does take some work. It does take some piecing together, and sometimes, very often it can be more than one dream. And, that's something that I do, is try to help people recognize a theme. But the emotional part of it is, I would not take that too lightly, because it's really a very, very important part. And I have a little, it's just a very simple way of looking at a dream as a 3-act play. So in the first act, it's really what the play is about. It tells us what's happening. And the second act is, this would be good for an emotional, for a relationship kind of dream. And the second act is the development. It shows how the dream is developing. And in the third act, we hope for the...
Are you there, Judy?
I'm here. Can you hear me? Hello? Hello? Hello?
Oh, yeah, there you are. Second, can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
You dropped out. Can you hear me?
I don't know what happened there. Yeah, I hear you just fine.
You can hear me now? Okay.
Yeah.
So where was I? I was in the second act?
Yes.
It's a 3-act play. For the second act, we see the dream as it develops. And in the third act, it's supposed to show us the resolution. Now, very often in one dream, we might not have a resolution immediately. Sometimes we can. But ultimately, it will come. I always say it's like Federal Express. If you're not at home, they keep coming back.
Mm-hmm.
Did you hear me?
Yeah, I still hear you. Yeah. The dreams can be kind of persistent. I know I went through a series of dreams after Katrina, which I lived in New Orleans when Katrina hit, about dome houses. I became really fixated on these dome houses for a while.
Uh-huh.
And I think it was because dome houses are much more storm resistant than our traditional box-shaped houses.
Right. Of course you would be dreaming about anything that would provide you more protection than what you have living in an area like that, And you probably, I would imagine you were probably having a lot of water dreams at the same time.
Actually, I didn't, and I was one of the really fortunate ones. All of my friends lost everything. Okay, I was the only one that didn't lose really anything. My house didn't flood. It wasn't destroyed. I had electricity back to the house 4 days after the storm, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I'm so light. It's almost scary. I didn't even have traffic when I evacuated. I mean, nothing went wrong. If I needed it, it seemed to appear. My guardian angel was very busy that month. And so I don't know why the fixation on the dome houses happened for me.
Well, because could it be that you were just, you were feeling very empathic toward all the people around you?
Well, definitely. I mean, anybody who went back to New Orleans, we dealt with months of inconvenience and long lines, and you couldn't find things or buy things, and stores weren't open very long and didn't have much in them, and lots of hassles. I mean, nothing went smooth when you went back, and it was very difficult. And that was true for everybody that was back. It was for the ones that were trying to get back. Housing was in short supply, et cetera, et cetera. And, it was a very difficult time for anybody who was impacted by the storm, whether you lived in Mississippi or in New Orleans itself or anywhere else in Louisiana. So it was a very devastating storm, and in each area there was some real unique things about the damages that it caused.
Well, I can remember watching an awful lot of footage on TV and how people were just so amazingly generous and gracious to their neighbors who had lost more than they had, and some people who had lost everything, and how grateful they were just to be alive.
Yeah, it was a traumatic time, and I think the ones that were the hardest hit were the ones over about 60, 65. Because I think they were well prepared to start over again.
Right.
So it was more traumatic emotionally for them than it was for younger people.
I also was wondering about so many people in nursing homes and hospitals and what happened to them,
Yeah, unfortunately, there was a number of fatalities. Not everyone was evacuated before the storm. And as far as what the details were for all of those, I can't say. It wasn't something that I followed, and, once I returned to New Orleans, I no longer had television and whatnot to show me what was going on. So all I heard was the stuff that you heard from people you knew.
Right.
And
I mean, this is where the sort of a healing and transformational quality enters the dream, because again, always dreaming about survival of self, no matter how mundane it may appear. That's what we're doing.
Well, you know, sometimes we talk about precognitive dreams, and in my case, before the hurricane, this is before it appeared anywhere, I started having these dreams about not being able to find my way out of New Orleans.
Whoa.
And they really bothered me.
Right.
And I went and talked to a friend who kind of, you know, poo-pooed me about being kind of a sissy, you know, and you know, so forth and so on. And I was like, you know, I don't know. And so, yeah, I've often remembered those dreams that I had about not being able to find my way out. And when it actually came down to it, you know, I simply chose a road out of town and just went. You know, and that's why I ultimately ended up in northeastern Texas, was because that's where the road went. Did I deliberately choose where I went? No. But there were some funny coincidences along the way.
So, and it's just so interesting that your dream was telling, I mean, in your dream you were you looking for a place?
I was looking for a way out of town.
Yeah.
In the dream, I could never find my way out.
And
I was always lost.
Yeah, and how long before Katrina was it?
A couple of weeks. It was a while before Katrina.
Mhm. So, what that dream, what you had as your Katrina dream, which it was pretty clearly that, is exactly what happened with me, but I had it with earthquakes and oil disasters and tsunamis. I had the Sumatra earthquake, the Haiti earthquake, the BP oil disaster. So, you know, that's what I meant before when I said it starts with survival of self, and then it goes to survival. And that's really where the transcendence is. So, you know, if you were dreaming about stronger houses, it's pretty likely that you were thinking about stronger houses, not just for you, but for all of your friends.
Well, for me, it actually went beyond dreams. During that same time period, I was dreaming about these dome houses. Every time I would go into a doctor's office, dentist office, any place where you had to sit and wait, and, you know, there's magazines there. I'd pick up a magazine at random, flip it open, and what would be there? A dome house.
Okay.
I mean, it was like I couldn't forget about them. I was just, you know, I was like, okay, this, you know, I did go and research them for quite a while, because I'm like, obviously there's something about dome houses I should know. So, you know, I probably know more than the average person about dome houses. No, I've never been inside of one and never owned one.
Well, that's pretty amazing, because, I mean, what you were doing was, you know, you're actually manifesting. Had you had a dream about dome houses?
Yeah, it started off with a serial dream. It was there again, following your sort of play act situation. Dream started off with a particular dome house. It happens to be in Florida on the coast that I had seen before and after a hurricane. And, you know, the first dream was about the first time I saw it, and then the second time I saw it, and then the third time I saw it. And, you know, then the dream began building from, you know, outward from that. And, you know, it started with memories, and then it started with, you might say, fictional situations I've never actually seen with dome houses. Right down to a dream where I was building a dome house.
That's amazing.
And then also the magazines, you know, every time I pick up a magazine, there'd be a dome house. So
you were actually, I mean, it was obviously precognitive, and your dreams were materializing in waking life. And,
yeah, it was pretty strange, and like I said, once I started researching it, it stopped. the weird stuff stopped.
Oh, that's interesting.
You know, I quit dreaming about them. I quit every time I picked up a magazine or anything. It didn't have something about dome houses in it. It rarely comes up in conversation anymore. But yeah, for a period of time, I dreamed about it, and I would be picking up these magazines, and it got real weird about the frequency of the dome houses situation thing coming up until I started researching it. And once I started researching it, it was like, now you know what you need to know. We don't have to bother you anymore. I don't know.
Well, that seems to be the way it works, you know.
Yeah. But it is now time for us to take a break, folks. So hold on to your keyboards and don't move a muscle. We'll be taking our short break, and we'll be right back with more from Judy B. Gardner.
Getch. I hope to see you on Friday at 8 p.m. Pacific on the Galactic Connection, keeping you connected 1 hour at a time. For more information, please visit thegalacticconnection.com.
I'm your host, Gio Scott, and tonight we're talking with Judy B. Gardner. So, Judy, before we get started, would you like to remind people where to take a look at your website while they're listening?
Yes, it's www.cosmicdreaming, that's one word, COSMICDREAMING.com. And if they click on the Lavender link, they will see all the information about the book, Lavender, and where to order it from Amazon.com.
Okay. Now, Judy, while we were on break, we were talking about how often people think that either they don't dream or they know that they dream, but they don't remember their dreams. So, you know, coming from, you might say, like a microculture that's always regarded as dreams as something insightful into what's going on around you, what's going on inside of you, etc. You know, in my own family, we tend to talk about our dreams, good and bad, because sometimes we all have dreams that are, born from a horror movie is the only way I could think of it. I don't even watch horror movies or movies with lust because they do affect my dreams. But that's my personal thing, is that when I see something, my mind thinks I really saw it. It really happened. So, you know, knowing that about my own mental processes, I know I can't watch these gruesome movies without it affecting me. As though I was there. So since I don't like to deal with, what do they call it, post-traumatic stress syndrome over a movie, right, I figure it's just easier not to watch the movie.
Great. I mean, I'm really having trouble even watching the news these days.
Well, yeah, maybe that's why I don't do TV. So it does eliminate a lot of things from your life when you don't have regular television, you know, in your house. And I haven't had it for years. So, in fact, most of my adult life I haven't had it, either because I lived where it wasn't available or by choice. So, you know, the whole thing is that people do all dream. And this is a known scientific fact. Everybody dreams. The thing is that most people maybe don't remember them. How can a person work on remembering their dreams to gain more insight about their own personal life, their interaction with, cosmic reality, or whatever facet that is interesting them?
Well, what I usually recommend just to start with is to be open to accepting whatever the dream wants to tell you. And we usually can do that if we're in trouble. Because when we're in trouble, we just need to find some outlet where we can try to understand what to do. So I would say to start by not being afraid. And what that does is it's a sort of a conscious intention to release from ego. Because once we get into the dream state, the dream does that for us. We completely release from ego in the dream. And if we're still hanging on to it, not that ego is a bad thing, but if it's still, because we need ego in order to navigate life. But if we're still hanging on to certain egocentric thoughts about other people and so forth, the dream will come in and tell you about that. I always say the dreams are our best friends, and usually the ones that are our very best friends are the nightmares. And people have a lot of trouble with that, but it's true. So I would start off by saying, be open, don't be afraid, and state your intention that you want to receive whatever is coming in. If you're dealing with a particular issue, you can state that intention. Now, this is something that has been debated, but I have found it to be true, is that when you awaken and you know, it can even be in the middle of the night, and you know you've had a dream, try not to turn over in bed. Because if you're on your left side, for example, when you were dreaming, and you turn to your right side, I have noticed, and other people have as well, that the dream just vanishes. So you just try to keep a pad and pencil next to the bed on both sides. And if you're able just to jot down a tiny fragment, it doesn't even have to be a whole story. It can just be a thread. It's amazing, Gia, what people have found when they just have like one single image, what can come out of that dream. And it's sort of like a kitten chasing a ball of yarn, it can begin to unravel because you think you've lost it all, but then there's that one piece that'll grab onto it, to the rest of it. And another thing to do is to give each dream a title, so that if you are collecting them, you have something concrete in mind in terms of what that dream brought to you. For example, your dream about the chickens, you could just say singing chickens, that kind of thing.
That's exactly how I mentally title it. And I think about it, there's another dream that I had, and this is nearly 30 years ago. It was so traumatic, I woke up standing up on my bed, drenched in sweat.
Wow.
It was really, really, and that one is mentally titled The Bone Getter Dream.
The Bone Getter?
The Bone Getter Dream. Yeah, in this particular dream, this particular time in my life, I worked in law enforcement. And in this dream, I was running through these little houses with narrow alleys between them. It wasn't normal streets. It wasn't anything like the little town I lived in and worked in. Nothing like that. There was little strange houses. And a friend was with me, and we're running, and the bone getters are going to try and get us. And we don't want them to get us because they were going to steal our bones.
Ooh.
Obviously, that was not something you wanted to have happen. I don't remember it as being fatal. It was something akin to a vampire stealing your blood. Apparently, you became a bone getter if they got you. I don't know how it all worked, but anyhow, you didn't want them to catch you. And in my hand, I had this sheet of rubbery decals. And if we could get these decals stuck on us, they wouldn't know that we weren't bone getters too, and they'd quit chasing us. but they were rubbery, and I couldn't get my finger to go through to make holes for my eyes and my mouth so I could see and breathe. And we ran into this person's house, and every little town's got them, I'm sure, but there was a small-town drug dealer sitting at the table, and he was chopsticks. And we were trying to act nonchalant like we meant to walk through his door. And, you know, there he is chopping vegetables, and he was a bone getter, too, and we didn't want him to know we were a bone getter. Weren't bone getters, and then we made some sort of mistake. I don't remember what it was. Some sort of mistake where he realized we weren't. And so he's chasing us with the knife he was chopping up vegetables with. Then I woke up, standing up in the middle of the bed, drenched in sweat. I'd apparently been running in place on the bed from the looks of it. I mean, I was drenched. You know, what did that dream symbolize? I have no idea, unless, you know, the bone getters symbolized drug abuse and drug gangs and culture and that whole thing. You know, that's the only thing I ever came out of it. It was something that would take away your bones, take away your spine, you might say, and you weren't going to be yourself anymore. That was the only interpretation I could ever put on it, but it was really, I mean, like I said, it was nearly 30 years ago, and I still remember that dream like it was last week.
And you remember it in detail.
Yes.
I mean, it's just so interesting that you were working in law enforcement at the time, right?
Right.
So, you were probably in contact with some strange characters, right?
Well, yeah, you knew about all the dirt in a town. Working in a small town in the police department is like having the grapevine running directly through your own brain. You know everything about everybody, and everybody you see at the grocery store, you know something about. Right. I mean, it quickly becomes real. I think I lasted 4 years, and I not only quit, I left town. It just gets to the point where nobody has any secrets because you know everything. You know who was having an affair. You know who threatened who. You know who was fighting with who stole what from who. You knew everything about everybody. Small towns are bad enough as it is when you had that level of detail of knowledge about everybody stored in your little pea brain. It really kind of took the fun of living in a small town away.
Right, but I mean, were you in the position of having to deal, you know, with people who were on drugs or any?
Not in person. I was dealing with it mostly through paperwork and recorded interrogations, you know, and that facet. I wasn't in the streets carrying a gun. You know, I wasn't that kind of involved in law enforcement. You had to do X number of ride-along hours with the officers. So you did, you know, there have been times when, yes, I had somebody's confiscated gun and bullets dumped in my lap, literally. You know, and I had things like that happen too, but was I actually in the line of fire? No, I worked in the office and didn't deal with it on a day-to-day basis. Small-town police departments are different than big city ones too, because a lot of times it's like you've combined social services with law enforcement.
Yes.
You know, you take on a whole different set of responsibilities in a small town. It's not as compartmentalized. You're not just dealing with criminal activity. You're dealing with everything.
Right. Well, you know, what comes to me is that, first of all, the dreams are just loaded with hyperbole. They will exaggerate everything. They will make everything bigger and scarier and more bizarre and weirder than it could possibly be in waking life. And that's a very creative dream you had about bone getters and that they're out to steal your bones. But, I mean, it could be that because you are so sensitive and because you were exposed to, you know, a certain aspect of criminal activity, it could be that something had happened right around that time that was frightening to you, that you were trying to get away from?
Well, during that time period, all of the people that I had gone to school with, not all of them, but many of the ones that I'd gone to school with and been friends with as teenagers, had dropped like flies as a result of drugs. That was about right after that wave of crack houses and stuff hit small-town America.
Okay.
And, it just, one after another, suicides, gun-related violence, or drug-related violence, drug overdoses, and it was like every week you heard somebody else had been killed or died.
Oh, dear. So
and, it really was, it took a huge toll of people. When I think back, with the bunch of kids that I'd ran with as a teenager, only one of them's still alive.
Oh,
it's not very good odds,
No. Well, that had to have played a very big part in this dream.
I'm sure, because I did kind of interpret it as it was relevant to the rampant drug culture that seemed to be spreading, at an unbelievable rate around me, and that, if I didn't stay away from it, it was going to swallow me up too.
And get your bones.
Get your bones. In essence, that, your spine is representative of your willpower, and that's a bone, or a series of bones, actually. And to lose your bones or lose your spine would mean that you would be more easily...
Exactly. And it's also significant that you were standing. When you woke up, you were standing on your bed.
Well, in the dream, when I woke up and the dream stopped, I was actually in the act of running. And I think I actually had jumped to my feet in the bed and had started running in place. I sleepwalk as well, so that for me would not be unusual, because I often will wake up someplace other than where I was asleep at.
Right.
So, I'm one of those unfortunate people that, that switch is supposed to keep you from doing that. Doesn't always go off for me. So I will get up out of bed and I will go do things, and in the past I've even been known to go outside. So, I'm apt to act out the dream, which can be a little risky. I used to have this fear of landing up in a jail cell and not even knowing how I got there.
Okay, so how is that today, their condition?
The sleepwalking? I actually don't do as much of it as I used to. And that's kind of typical. As we get older, we tend to do less sleepwalking. But, sleepwalking's plagued me pretty much my entire life.
Well, I think, do you feel that it could have been that all the violence and the drug culture that you were around could have prompted this dream? No one knows except the dreamer. No one can tell you what your dream means. Only you know. Right,
yeah. That was the interpretation I put on it. At the time, it was like, whoa, that's just really weird. I regarded it as just as weird as the singing chickens. However, it was scary weird, not funny weird. One of
the phrases that Monty, that was my partner, coined was, "If it were my dream." And I was thinking about your chirping or your singing chickens while we were on break, and I was saying to myself, well, if that were my dream, I would think of that as a very happy dream, because song is, any kind of song, they were not threatening.
And I didn't perceive it as threatening. I perceived it as something bizarre, funny, weird, not scary, weird. We all have weird dreams, and sometimes they're scary, and they can affect us too. You talked about nightmares being your best friend. Well, I know in my own case, there have been periods of time where the nightmares became so severe. Usually after a traumatic event, you would dream that event as though you were going through it all over again. And it would actually get to the point of creating a phobia in me of being afraid to go to sleep. So it would really aggravate my insomnia, because I happen to be someone that is also plagued with insomnia. I don't always go to sleep when I should. I may sleep for a little while and then be wide awake, in the dead of night. And that's something that I've dealt with my entire life already. And so when I would become, when I would dread going to sleep because the nightmares, that became another kind of problem for me.
That's another issue. Well, I just want to clarify, when I say they're our best friends, that usually nightmares are there to show us that there's something in that nightmare that's got to change. And if it's not our own personal life, as it was not in the case of your bone getter, then it's your surrounding. It's just cluing you into something that you should probably stay away from.
Right. I mean, traumatic events, obviously, it's trying to make an impression on you as far as, A, don't do that again. B, sometimes you're dealing with psychological issues like guilt over the event and its results.
Yes.
All sorts of psychological thing about a traumatic event can be going on. Could I have done something different and it would have ended up different?
Right.
And so forth and so on.
Well, that's being human, and there's no way around that.
Right. In my own case, I did eventually find a solution. I acquired a dog, and after a number of months, I'd gone on a camping trip and took the dog with me. And on the camping trip, we discovered that with the cot in the tent, there was no floor space for the dog to sleep, but there was room at the foot of the cot for her to sleep there. So she decided, and it was really cold because we were camping in November, high in the mountains, so it was cold, like down in the teens. And so having a nice, warm, furry dog sleeping at your feet was not a bad thing. But when we got home, she decided she liked doing that. She was going to continue doing that. I still argued with her, a decade later about whether or not she was going to be on the bed. And so with her on the bed, what happened is she apparently would notice when I would start going into these nightmares. And instead of going into the nightmare, she'd take her cold nose and stick it in my neck. And anybody who has a large dog knows that's probably going to, if not completely wake you up, it's going to wake you from the dream state into that pre-dream state again.
Right.
And essentially what she did, she stopped the cycle of nightmares, which stopped the fear of going to sleep, which let me start moving on.
You still have her?
Oh, yeah, I still have the dog. Yeah, she's still my best buddy, and she's still very old, and she happens to be in trouble right now because she got in the trash the other night and made a huge mess. But, yeah, she still absolutely adores me and thinks I walk on water.
Oh, how wonderful.
Yeah, she's getting old now, though.
So she came to your rescue.
Yeah, she did. And it's one of those funny things about dogs. Some dogs have a natural ability to recognize emotional states in people. She happens to consistently recognize depressed people.
Wow.
And she pesters them to get them to pet her. And apparently there's something about the act of petting an animal that releases something in that pineal gland that counteracts depression. Anyhow, I was depressed when I acquired her, and it apparently has affected the way she interacts with people. She's not to say she's a saint. She's not. If somebody's deathly afraid of large dogs, she will harass them. Okay, she will really torment them, and she'll do things like growl real softly so that I can't hear her when I go in the kitchen to get coffee. And they're cowering in fear, afraid to move from the sofa. She's done all sorts of things to people who she thinks that's funny.
Oh my God! I would not be a good candidate for your dog. I mean, I love dogs, but I'm terrified of really large dogs. How large?
I don't consider her really large, but I've worked with dogs my whole life. In her prime, she weighed like 85, 90 pounds. She's not as muscular these days, and she's kind of got expansion in the middle, like all older adults get. And so she's now down to 65 because muscle is more compact and has a heavier mass or more mass than the softer tissue does. But yeah, she doesn't weigh as much, even though she is chunkier than she used to be, and about the size of a collie, I guess, a little heftier. She's much broader.
That's not so good.
No, she's not a huge dog, and especially if you put her alongside something like a Saint Bernard or Newfoundland or Irish Wolfhound. She's just big enough that she's done her job over the years at intimidating people who meant me less than goodwill, you might say. Living in less than wonderful neighborhoods, we all had neighbors that we wish we didn't. When they would come around to thinking they were being cute or whatever and harass me late at night, she had this habit of just leaning over and giving a Colgate smile. There's something about large white canine teeth showing that just people find a need to cross the street, go the other direction, whatever. Yeah.
See, one of those, dear. Do you know that they're doing a lot of research on dogs dreaming?
I know that they dream because she'll often be laying here, and sometimes she'll, woof softly while her feet are twitching.
Right.
Sometimes she'll whimper. I've even heard her yelp in her sleep, like somebody, some sort of pain or something.
Well, probably having a dream. There was a YouTube video. Do you have YouTube?
Oh, that dog that got up and ran into the wall?
Right.
Yeah, that one went viral on the internet. I'll have to hunt it up and put up the link on the website or something. But
right.
Yeah.
Then he went back. He went back to where he was sleeping and continued his dream. They think.
Yeah, dogs definitely dream. Kittens and cats. We've all seen them do things in their sleep too.
Yeah.
I would say that probably most animals, at least of the higher animals with more developed brains, do some sort of dreaming. Just like there's a wide range of level of intelligence in dogs. All dogs are not created equal any more than all people are created equal. I think I have a couple of examples of the polar extremes. We have Sissy, who is not the brightest bulb that ever came out of a box. And then we have Red, who knows a number of human words as well as a number of other things. And, Sissy, after years of being with me, hasn't mastered sit or be quiet.
Really?
Sissy is, she's, all my dogs are rescue dogs, but Sissy came to me sight unseen. She's a feist. And she's really not the brightest bulb that has ever been. She just doesn't get it, ever.
Oh, poor
she doesn't feel guilt. She doesn't feel guilt. Life's pretty simple for her. She doesn't feel guilt. Red, when she gets in the trash, to this day, right now, if she was in here with me and I said, I remember who did that, she will get up and leave the room because she knows I haven't forgot about the trash yet.
She's smart.
Yeah. She doesn't remember it. That was 2 seconds ago. It's gone.
Yeah.
So, there's, I see the difference we have 3 dogs, and then we have Nemo, the Chihuahua, and he's the most recent of our crew, and he's sort of in the middle. But, because he does get a lot of things, but I wish he got the housebreaking thing a little bit better. He's a leg hiker. That's probably what he dumped.
Oh, that's a great big dog and a little tiny Chihuahua.
Yeah. We have a 5-pounder, a 25-pounder, and a 65-pounder.
Oh, dear. It sounds like a lot of fun. Well, do you ever have dreams about your animals aside from your
one time I had this really vivid dream about, I had a lion dog. She was a dog, but she was a lion. Now, it happens to be that Red Dog her body is somewhat the color of a lion, a little most, but somewhat that color, and she kind of has a bit of a mane. The hair is a little thicker, in the neck and shoulder area, coarser and thicker. She has a black face instead of the same colored face, or she did when she was younger. Now it's kind of frosted, But, I had this real vivid dream about she was a lion dog. And I was petting her mane. I was really petting her in my sleep, and
Oh, you were actually petting her.
Actually petting the dog, yeah. But I was really proud of my lion dog.
Yeah, well, you figured that one out. You combined her physical appearance with your.
And another time I had a dream about we were out in the bayous with a dog. I don't remember what the context of the dream was, other than she had gone after something and swam around one of the islands and then didn't come back. And my husband had gone after her, and then he came back with her, and an alligator had bit off a leg, and he told me that it didn't matter. She was getting old anyhow. I still give him a hard time about that. Even though he said it in a dream, he didn't really say. But, yeah, she didn't need that.
Was this your husband's dream?
Pardon?
Was this your husband's dream?
No, it was my dream.
Yeah,
but in the dream, he said that. And so I
said that, okay.
Yeah, in the dream, he had said that. And so I woke up, I was really angry with him still. I mean, we talk about dreams affecting us. I woke up angry with him because he had said she didn't need that leg. She was getting old.
Well, I mean, because they are so powerful. I mean, it is another level of reality, and it's just great that you are so tuned into it, and I hope that your listeners are understanding the power of these dreams. It came to me when we were talking about your series of dreams about the Katrina.
Uh-huh.
Is that Katrina, that you had this series?
Yeah, I had one before it, and then one before it was about not being able to find my way out of town. And in the one after it, it was about dome houses.
Oh, right. Okay. So, I mean, I thought it was just so interesting because there's a couple of things here on when the dome houses, that you were having that experience of dreaming it and then finding it in waking. That's called, in the research, that's called synchronous experiences. That's where you connect dreams with waking, which is exactly what you did. And that is where the intuitive and the spiritual function in waking and dreaming consciousness cultivates the potential of transcendence. So that you're able to do that is really, I think, great, because that's the idea, is to try to bridge the gap. And you can't, that's one thing that you cannot intend to do, because the synchronous it takes place outside of space and time. Even the waiting part, like when you picked up the magazine, there's no
because I wasn't looking for an article about a dome magazine. I would just randomly pick one up off the table,
right,
and flip it open, like you do when you're in a waiting room.
Right. You weren't looking for it, and I mean that's where the synchrony comes in. I mean, that happened to me an awful lot in my journey of lavender, because I would be taken to places. I was guided to places through my dreams where I would have very specific images. For example, a picket fence. And then I would get to a little town that I had never been in before, a very remote little town in Newfoundland. And I would see nothing but picket fences. Everywhere I went, there were picket fences. Well, there are obviously no picket fences in New York City where I was. And, that's just one example of many. So it's really telling us that when we're able to do that, we're sort of like tuning in to the universe, and that's where this whole idea of what Monty called bidirectional dreaming. So what he talked about there was that, the Rod Janis, who looks in two directions,
right?
At one time, is that's what our dreams do, Gia. We look backwards and we look forward. We look at the past and we look at the future. And We also look inward, and we look outward. We look inward to our personal issues, and we look outside of ourselves to our global issues. So it sounds to me as though you're doing all of that. And I congratulate you because I can see you're a seasoned dreamer. And I hope that your audience is able to contact you and find out more about dreams.
I think too with the dreaming and the synchronicity with your day-to-day life, in a sense, have to be open-minded to recognize it.
Absolutely, that's the first order.
Even though after a while I began to become a little bit aggravated with this whole dome house thing, I would disgustedly throw down the magazine and pick up a different one and flip it open, and there it is again. And it was really persistent even when I was getting aggravated with it, because I was like, you know what, I'm not in the market for a house. I don't want to build a house. I don't want to live in a goofy shaped igloo. I don't want to hear any more about this. I'm really tired of it. They look silly. They look like a big old fat spider on legs when you see them up on stilts, and so forth and so on. I've given myself all these lectures about these dome houses, and it was really persistent. Now, why did I need to know about it? As far as I know, I have never needed any of that knowledge. But
it cost you to move. I mean,
eventually I did leave New Orleans, and I moved to the Gulf Coast, and then now I've moved, a little bit more inland in Mississippi. Eventually it got to the point where the idea that there's two bridges out of town just sort of grated on my nerves,
It was that you needed, a dome house, as you said earlier, is stronger than the other little houses that were there. So, it seems that, it was your dream, so it's hard for me to say, but it seems as though your dream might have been, if it were my dream, I would have felt that, it's telling me that, I'm in need of a stronger structure to live in.
Yeah, and, sometimes I've had dreams, too, that turned out to be, as the saying goes, much ado about nothing. I had this one dream. This is when I was getting ready to leave New Orleans, that I moved out like the 1st of August. I was gone out of New Orleans. And in the dream, on a day, I don't remember what day it was, in August, at a specific time, specific day, a tornado hit. And lo and behold, I was like, there's no way you can get me into New Orleans that day. And lo and behold, a family member and some friends were going to go to New Orleans that day and called and asked me to go. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to go, but please do me a favor. Don't go today. Go tomorrow or go the day before, but not that day. And they're like, why? And it was like, I know it's silly, because precognition usually is not that specific, a specific day and time.
That's right.
But, this was really specific, and, it's kind of weirding me out because I don't do that to begin with. So please don't go. No, nothing happened that day. There was no tornado in New Orleans. There wasn't even a storm. Mm-hmm. Nothing happened. But could you have gotten me to go to New Orleans that day? Oh, no.
No, because, what you say about the precognitive dream is absolutely correct, is that we never know it's precognitive until it happens. And it can happen the next day, it can happen a week from then, it can happen in 5 or 10 years. We just do not know. But it's better to err on the side of caution, because these dreams don't come to us for there's always a reason behind it. There's one thing,
and I guess the way I look at it, just because there was no tornado that day,
right?
There might have been some other reason that I should not have been going to New Orleans that day.
Right. Tornado.
Something that I will never be aware of because I didn't go to New Orleans that day.
Right.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Did it cause a big change in my life? No. I was just going to schedule any reason for me to be in New Orleans or anything where near New Orleans that day.
you were just being very cautious. And, what you said about the tornado may not have been an actual tornado. It might have been a metaphor for a tornado. It's some sort of activity that would resemble a tornado, some sort of
Yeah, because tornado is sort of symbolic for, chaos and change and wind and destruction and, all that sort of thing.
Definitely destruction. So, no, it's a good thing you didn't go. So, there's just one point I want to raise before, because it's looking like we're going to have to wind it up. But I'm often asked the question that everyone in a dream is me. People say, is that true that everyone in a dream is me? And they find this very confusing. Have you had that experience? I mean, have you had that question, I should ask?
Well, I guess, when I'm dreaming and I'm going through, seeing something, I always look at my feet and legs.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes the me, it's like I'm looking out through somebody else's eyes. That's the only way I can put it. It's not the body that I have.
Okay.
So it's not me doing it or experiencing it, but rather this other body, and I'm sharing the experience with them. So in the dreams, when I'm wondering, who is this, I look at my feet.
Oh, that's very interesting. Okay.
Now, other people I've talked to say they look at their hands. But in my particular case, I look at my feet.
And that's when you're able to identify whose feet they are, or?
Yeah, and even what age I am. Because now that I'm on the far side of 50, when I was on the low side of 50, my feet look different. And when I was in my 20s, they looked different. When I was a child, they looked different. So your feet age with you.
Oh, so they're always your feet, though?
No, sometimes they're somebody else's feet. The skin's a different color. The foot is a different shape. I don't have petite feet, okay? I've got feet that, they were built to be a foundation to live my life on, okay? And they're stout. I don't have little delicate feminine feet. I've got feet. So sometimes I'll look down and these might be, my skin might be browner, or the skin might be smoother, or a younger foot, or a more delicate shaped foot. I've got cave woman feet, or the shoes might be something that I would never wear, or whatever. But my shoes, my feet, my legs, they're going to tell me either what age I am or that I'm in somebody else's body.
Well, that's so interesting, because years ago I had been to a seminar conducted by Dick Sutton. Do you know who he is?
No, I don't.
Well, he does a lot of sort of past life regressions, and one of the exercises that he gave us was to, he takes you down to alpha level, and you're sort of in a semi-hypnotic state, and then he asks you to look at your feet and tell yourself what you know about those feet. What shoes are you wearing? What shape of the foot? Is it decorated with something from a bygone age? Are you wearing heavy sandals like they did, And it's really quite amazing, because some people will actually tap into a past life based on that. And you're the first person I've ever heard that really just does it naturally.
Yeah, my feet have always been the cue. And for one thing, even in a dream, some people say, look at a mirror to see what your face looks like. It's never occurred to me in a dream to find a mirror. Mirrors have never been in any of my dreams, hardly. But my feet are always there.
Your feet.
Because or whatever. I can look down and see my feet as a normal part of whatever I'm doing in the dream.
Right. But they could also be, as you said, they are sometimes feet that are not yours.
Right.
And they could be your feet from some other time, if you believe in that.
Right. And, it's not the body that I'm currently occupying. It's not the here and now. Whether I'm sharing somebody else's dream, as in somebody who's dream walking, or I'm simply, sort of doing the movie-making thing in my own head, and I'm, going through this storyline, and I'm the main character or whatever. However you want to look at the dream, when I look at my feet, it tells me my relationship to what's going on.
Well, that's fantastic, because you may be looking at your feet when they're actually somebody else's feet, and that just says that everything in us is reflected in another person, right down to our feet. Let's see.
Yeah, well, nobody will ever look at me and say, oh, she has such delicate feminine feet. Like I said, cave woman feet.
Yeah, but in your dreams, are they always the feet that you...
No, sometimes, like I said, it's somebody else's feet entirely. Or sometimes it's, much younger, and, when I was, in my teens and early 20s, I had much more delicate looking feet than I have today after I've been walking around on them on 50-some years. So that, is something that reflects age, because we're not always the same age in our dreams.
Oh, that's for sure.
We're not always ourselves in the dream, in the sense of I'm Gia Scott, and, so forth and so on. So, that is where I look for my cue as to how this dream relates to me here and now. Or
to somebody else.
Right. Well, I know if I look down and they're not my feet, okay, this dream isn't going to be about something I'm doing.
Exactly right. So that's the dreaming comes in, because we can have a dream thinking it's about us, but then it turns out to be about somebody else. And lots of people get confused by this. But basically, if you're a person with great empathy and compassion, you can very easily be dreaming about another person. Yeah,
that's very true.
And the key is to identify who that person is.
Yeah, I'll admit, I cannot identify most people by their feet, okay? But, I guess, like my kids and my husband, their feet are pretty familiar to me.
Right.
I tease my daughter about having hobbit feet because she's a very petite woman, so she's got very petite hands and feet. And I laugh because my hands are, a certain percentage smaller than my mother's, but yet they look very similar to my mother's hands. And hers are about the same proportion smaller than mine, yet are shaped very similar to mine. It's just that, all three of us have, a certain size, slightly smaller hand. Mm-hmm. And, I find that rather amusing and strange, but, it's something that I remember very well, that my hands look like my mother's, but they're a size smaller. Right. My daughters look like mine, but they're a size smaller.
Right. You've got a lot of sizes. You've got a lot of sizes between your dogs and your hands and your feet. With each generation and your different set of DNA, you do come out. I'm a little bit shorter than my mother. I'm a little bit lighter boned than my mother. And then my daughter, the family joke was the only way I could get a family member smaller than me was to be her mother. And my daughter's very petite. She's much smaller than I am. And I was short. She's really short. So it was just one of those funny things, because every family, razzes you about your similarities and differences. And I happen to be a little bit smaller than the average, a little bit shorter, and she's a lot shorter. But we are winding down now. You want to tell everybody where to find your website and book again? Oh, sure. The name of the book is Lavender. The subtitle is An Entwined Adventure in Science and Spirit. It can be found at Amazon.com, and it can also be found on my website, which is CosmicDreaming.com.
CosmicDreaming.com. Remember, folks, to take a look at the website, see what else you can see. Dreaming is something that we all do, and it can help make us better people as well as smarter people and even more efficient.
Yes, and
Well,
to
that's
remember
fine.
that everything that has ever happened in our dreams is really imprinted on our collective soul. So it comes to us as an individual, but then at the end of the day, we are really all one.
Yes.
It's a concept, but it's what I find to be true.
Very much so. Well, folks, we have unfortunately run out of time all too quickly again, but I hope that tonight's program has given everyone plenty of food for thought as well as more illumination for your personal journey towards truth. Tune in again next time as we bring another guest, another topic, and a whole new idea for your consideration. You've been listening to The Dawn of Shades, and I'm your host, Gia Scott, and good night.
Of the solar system and extending to interstellar regions beyond. This